When you think about ancient historical sites today, the image that usually comes to mind is this incredibly sterile environment.
Oh, for sure. Very quiet.
Yeah, you walk into a museum and it is entirely silent. The atmosphere is just static. You have these priceless artifacts sitting perfectly still behind like half an inch of thick glass.
And there are those velvet ropes keeping you at a very safe distance from everything.
Right. Everyone is whispering. And then, at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, the security guards usher everyone out. They lock the heavy doors, turn off the display lights, and the whole place goes entirely dark and silent until the next morning.
It becomes a tomb, essentially.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it is a monument to a civilization that used to be alive, but now only exists as a subject of quiet observation. You were looking at the frozen remains of history.
But then you look at the historical reality of the temple in ancient Jerusalem, and that modern museum comparison just falls apart completely.
It shatters.
It really does,
Yeah.
because the lights did not go off at 5 o'clock in Jerusalem. The doors were not all locked up while the city went to sleep. This was a massive 24-hour operation.
Oh, absolutely.
It was filled with fire, with constant movement, with the smell of roasting grain and incense, and there was this very specific, continuous kind of noise.
It was an active breathing center of an entire society. I mean, it was the literal pounding heartbeat of a nation that did not take a break when the sun went down.
Welcome to Reformed Thinking. Today, we are taking you on a deep dive into a really fascinating piece of ancient text. We are looking at Psalm 134.
And we are using Charles Spurgeon's massive commentary, The Treasury of David, as our primary guide today.
Right, pulling in a stack of historical and theological sources along the way. And the mission for our conversation today is to give you a shortcut to understanding this specific ancient interaction.
We are going to examine a fleeting, microscopic moment in time, really.
Yeah, a pre-dawn exchange between two very different groups of people. And we will unpack how it offers a striking lesson on avoiding the trap of dead, mechanical religion.
And what is so fascinating here is the specific placement of this text. I mean, Psalm 134 is the very last of what are known as the Gradual Psalms, or the Songs of Degrees.
Okay, let's unpack that term for a second, because Songs of Degrees sounds like we were talking about geometry or maybe temperature.
Right.
And that is going to confuse people. What does that phrase actually mean in this ancient context?
Well, think of the word degrees in its older sense. It means steps or stairs.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. Geographically, Jerusalem sits up on a mountain, so no matter what direction you are coming from in the ancient world, you have to travel uphill to get there.
That makes sense.
So when the Israelites traveled up to Jerusalem for their major annual festivals, they were physically ascending. And these 15 short psalms, Psalms 120 through 134, well, they were the playlist for that uphill hike.
The ultimate road trip playlist.
Totally. They were the songs of the ascents. The pilgrims would sing them as they climbed the dirt roads leading up to the city, and eventually as they climbed, the literal stone steps up into the temple complex itself.
Which means Psalm 134, since it is the final one of the 15, is the end of the line. It is the conclusion of the festival.
The grand finale.
Yeah. And we need to set the physical scene for you so you can really picture what is happening in this specific moment. Imagine you are part of a massive group of travelers.
Just ordinary folks, right?
Right. You are common folks. You are farmers from Galilee, tradesmen, shepherds. You have come down to Jerusalem for a major festival, and you have spent days in this crowded, chaotic, thrilling city.
But now the festival is over.
It is early in the morning, well before dawn. The sky is pitch black. Maybe a few of the brightest stars are still visible.
And you have a very long, incredibly dangerous dirt road ahead of you to get back home.
Exactly. So you are packing up your camp while the night still lingers. You are shaking the cold dew off the canvas of your tents. You are tying up the pack animals, trying to keep your kids quiet and organized in the dark.
And the air is freezing. I mean, nights in the Judean hills usually are.
Yeah. You are exhausted from the week, and you are shivering. And as you step outside the city gates to begin the long walk north, you look up. Above you, dominating the skyline, is the massive retaining wall of the temple complex.
It is a staggering sight.
And up on that massive stone wall, you see guards walking the perimeter. You see the warm, flickering glow of oil lamps shining from the sanctuary windows out into the absolute dark.
And moved by this sight, this group of departing, freezing travelers calls out a farewell to the men working the night shift up in that holy shrine.
And that specific interaction is the structure we are examining today. It is unbelievably brief, just 3 short verses.
Right. Verses 1 and 2 are the departing travelers, these ordinary working-class people, calling out a loud farewell exhortation to the elite priests standing up on the wall.
And verse 3 is the benediction, the theological blessing that those priests shout back down into the valley.
So on the surface, we have a simple pre-dawn goodbye.
But here's where it gets incredibly interesting. How does a quick goodbye, shouted in the dark, offer us an intricate, detailed theological lesson on the state of our own hearts?
That is the big question.
To figure that out, we are going to jump straight into the first verse. It starts with a very specific, sharp word. The word is behold. Let me read it.
Go for it.
Behold, bless you the Lord, all ye servants of the Lord, which by night stand in the house of the Lord.
So Charles Spurgeon points out that this opening word, behold, is not a gentle suggestion.
Not at all.
No, in the original Hebrew, the word is hina. It functions like an alarm clock. It is a shout. It is a shrill cry from the travelers down below in the dirt, directed at the night watch up above on the stone walls.
They are stirring up this brotherhood of priests, telling them to wake up, pay attention, and constantly adore Jehovah.
I love that image so much. It is not a polite, quiet whisper in a library. It is a loud, ringing, echoing, behold.
Like a verbal clap of the hands.
Spot on.
But wait, let me push back on this scenario for a second, because the dynamics here seem entirely backward to me.
How so?
Well, these men up on the wall are the Levites. They are the priests. They are the holiest men in the nation, stationed in the absolute most sacred place on the planet, carrying out a divine mandate.
Right.
Why do a bunch of farmers packing up tents need to yell at them to do their jobs? Wouldn't praising God be automatic for a priest standing inside the temple?
You would definitely think so. But that assumption ignores a fundamental reality of human nature. And this is a critical insight John Calvin brings out in his commentary on this verse.
What does Calvin say?
Calvin details the relentless human tendency to abuse religious ceremonies and to default to thoughtless, empty routine. He points out that the travelers are actively warning the priests not to stand idly in the temple.
Ah, I see.
Think about the danger of their job. It is incredibly easy to treat a nightly religious duty as a mechanical, industrial chore.
Yeah, you clock in, you trim the wicks on the oil lamps, you sweep the ashes off the altar, you check the heavy brass locks on the gates, and you clock out.
Exactly. Your hands are doing holy things, but your mind is completely elsewhere.
That is the trap, isn't it?
It is. Calvin recognized that the human heart can turn even the most glorious, awe-inspiring worship into a lifeless checklist. Behold is a sharp cry to snap them out of that autopilot state and bring them to absolute spiritual attention.
It is the antidote to mechanical religion. The travelers are basically saying, do not just sweep the floors. Remember whose floors you are sweeping.
That is right. And if we connect this to the broader psychological picture, the commentator John Mayer makes a brilliant observation here.
What does he add?
He says, too much familiarity breeds contempt. Or, well, at the very least, it breeds profound apathy.
Yeah.
When you are surrounded by the sacred all day, every single day, the human brain stops registering the wonder of it. It just becomes the background noise of your life.
That makes total sense from a neurological perspective. The brain uses a process called habituation.
Right.
If you live right next to a massive roaring waterfall or a busy train track, the first week you live there, you cannot sleep because the noise is deafening.
It keeps you awake all night.
But after 6 months, you do not even hear the water or the train anymore. Your brain filters it out as irrelevant white noise so you can focus on other things.
And these priests live next to the spiritual waterfall. And the travelers are worried they've stopped hearing the roar.
Man, that is a great way to picture it.
Robert Bellarmine adds another layer to this concept, too. He focuses on the historical shift in Israel's architecture.
The architecture.
Yeah. He notes that the priests in this specific era now have a permanent, massive stone house of worship.
Right, the temple.
But in the older days, centuries prior, during the time of Moses and Joshua, the people were wandering in the wilderness. The tabernacle was a tent. It was temporary.
Made of animal skins and wood.
Yes, and it was vulnerable to the elements and to enemies.
There was a constant edge of survival. You could not fall asleep on duty because an Amalekite raiding party might come over the dune, or a sandstorm might blow the holy tent over.
Right. The urgency of the wilderness demanded acute awareness. But now, they have this staggering stone structure in Jerusalem. It has thick walls, massive gates, and a sense of absolute security.
So they get comfortable.
Bellarmine suggests that this kind of physical comfort and permanence can lead directly to taking the spiritual reality for granted.
Yeah.
The edge is gone.
So let's bring this directly to you, the listener, right now. Think about your own daily routines, especially your spiritual habits.
Yeah, that's the real question.
How often do you go through the motions of your duties without truly pausing to behold the bigger picture? When you sit in your usual seat on a Sunday morning, or when you open a familiar text you have read 30 times before?
Are you mentally, actively engaged with the creator of the universe? Or has habituation set in?
Have you just clocked in? Is your brain on the default mode network, filtering out the wonder like white noise?
The travelers are essentially yelling up to the massive walls, "Do not become a machine. You are in the direct presence of the living God."
Wake up your mind. Shake off the comfort of the stone walls.
It is a massive wake-up call to the professionals from the amateurs.
The ordinary folks standing in the muddy dirt are telling the elite theological guards on the high wall to stay spiritually alert. And that dynamic leads us to look much closer at who these guards actually were.
Which is the subject of the second half of verse 1.
Right. Which by night stand in the house of the Lord. Who were these night watchmen, and what did a night shift in the ancient temple actually entail?
To understand the sheer scale of what the travelers are looking at, we have to look at the exhaustive historical details provided by the scholar J.J. Stewart Perowne.
Okay.
He writes about the customs of the Second Temple period. We often picture the temple as just a large church building.
Like a big cathedral.
Yeah, but it was not. It was a sprawling, multi-acre complex of courtyards, slaughterhouses, treasuries, and
A
sanctuaries.
huge footprint.
Guarding it was not a job for one guy with a lantern. It was a highly organized, regimented military operation involving hundreds of Levites.
So paint that picture for us. Walk us through the timeline. What did the midnight routine look like on the ground?
According to the historical records Perowne synthesizes, the pivotal moment happened right around midnight. The chief doorkeeper, who was a high-ranking official, would take the massive iron key of the inner temple.
Okay.
He would gather a specific company of priests, and they would enter the complex through a very specific small entrance called the postern of the fire gate.
The fire gate. That name alone sounds intimidating.
It was. Once they passed through that small door and stood inside the vast, dark inner court, this watch divided itself into two distinct companies.
Like a modern security detail splitting up to cover the perimeter of a campus.
Very much so. Each company carried a burning torch. One group turned west, the other group turned east. They walked in completely opposite directions, compassing the entire inner court.
Walking the perimeter.
And they were not just walking for exercise, they were conducting a rigorous inspection. They were checking every lock, every gate, and every station to ensure that absolutely everything was in pristine readiness for the morning worship that would begin at dawn.
I am trying to put myself in their shoes and picture the sensory details of this patrol. I mean, you have the freezing cold stone paving blocks under their bare feet, right? Because priests had to work barefoot.
Yes, entirely barefoot.
You have the flickering, chaotic orange light of the torches casting these massive shifting shadows against the towering limestone walls.
Oh, the shadows would have been huge.
And you have the absolute heavy silence of the sleeping city outside, sharply contrasted with the quiet, rhythmic footsteps of these guards echoing inside the colonnades.
It is a highly atmospheric scene. And as these two companies walked their opposite semicircles around the court, their paths would eventually cross again on the far side.
Where did they meet up?
Perowne describes how they would meet at a very specific location, the bakehouse.
The bakehouse. What were they baking in the middle of the night?
This is where the high priest's daily offering, the mincha, was prepared.
Okay, the mincha.
Now, older English translations sometimes call this a meat offering, which confuses modern readers who picture a steak. In older English, meat just meant food.
Right, like meat and drink.
Yeah. The mincha was actually a grain offering. It was fine flour mixed with oil, baked into bread or cakes.
Oh, that completely changes the sensory picture. So they are walking through the freezing dark, and they arrive at a place that smells like a bakery. The warmth of the ovens, the smell of baking bread at 2 in the morning.
Yes. And when the two torch-bearing companies met in the warm glow of that bakehouse, they would formally greet each other with the all-clear cry.
What did they say?
They would shout, "All well."
All well. So it is a status report.
It was a very strict military protocol.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, as the patrol finished, the rest of the priests who were scheduled for the morning shift would arise from their stone beds in a designated sleeping chamber.
Getting ready for the day.
They had to bathe themselves in ritual water, put on their intricate official white garments, and gather in a specific stone room.
Wow.
There, under the superintendence of a commanding officer, their specific duties for the coming day, like who would clean the altar, who would arrange the wood, who would slaughter the sacrifice, were assigned to each of them by drawing lots.
So while the rest of the world was entirely unconscious, totally oblivious in their beds, there was this massive, hidden society operating under torchlight. But let's look at the mental state required to actually pull this off night after night. I mean, the commentator Samuel Martin makes some really keen observations about the psychological perils of working this specific night watch.
He does. And this cuts right to the heart of why the travelers needed to shout, "Behold."
Why is that?
Martin points out that while the rest of the city slept, these barefoot priests faced dual dangers. The first danger is the obvious physiological one, physical slumber.
Right, falling asleep on duty.
Yeah. In a military context, sleeping on watch is a severe offense. But the second danger Martin identifies is far more insidious. He calls it mental idle reverie.
Idle reverie, I love that phrase. It basically means just letting your mind detach from reality and drift into a state of absolute nothingness.
Yes. Think about how much time and energy is wasted in wandering, useless thoughts when the mind is entirely unoccupied, but the physical body is required to stay awake.
It happens to all of us.
You are standing in the dark. The adrenaline of the initial midnight patrol has worn off. The bakehouse inspection is done. You're just standing there shivering, waiting for the sun to come up over the Mount of Olives.
I can relate to this on such a fundamental level. I mean, it is the exact same psychology as someone working a graveyard shift today.
Oh, definitely.
Say you are a security guard at an empty corporate office building, or you are the night auditor at a quiet hotel. You have completed your rounds. Now you just have to sit at the desk from 3 a.m. to 6 a.m.
The worst hours.
The natural, overwhelming instinct is to zone out just to pass the time. You pull out your phone and scroll endlessly, you stare blankly at the wall, you let your brain power down to standby mode just to survive the sheer boredom of those hours.
But contrast that natural human instinct to zone out with the active, vigorous mental engagement required in spiritual matters.
Right.
Martin highlights that these guards were not called to just stare blankly into the dark and wait for dawn. They were called to actively fill that dead silence with praise.
Oh.
The travelers outside the wall were shouting up, "You have this incredible, unprecedented privilege of standing inside the sanctuary while everyone else is asleep. You are guarding the house of the Creator."
Do not waste these hours in idle daydreams. Actively bless Jehovah.
It is the stark difference between passive physical presence and active mental engagement. Just having your body inside the building is not enough.
You have to involve your mind. You have to direct your intellect. And I know Charles Spurgeon takes this historical reality of the Temple Night Watch and extends it to talk about something much broader regarding church history.
He does, and it is a breathtaking connection. Spurgeon, drawing from the notes of a commentator known as the village preacher, connects this physical night watch in ancient Jerusalem to metaphorical dark periods in human history.
Dark periods.
Yeah. The overarching theological principle is that God always has his guards. Always. Even when the night of ignorance or persecution or cultural decay settles heavily down on a society, there are always watchers stationed on the wall keeping the truth safe.
Give us some tangible historical examples of that. Who were the night watchers when the lights went out in history?
Well, think of John Wycliffe in the 14th century. He is translating the Bible into English during a period of intense spiritual and intellectual darkness in Europe, facing immense opposition.
He was awake while the church was asleep.
Totally. Or consider the Waldenses, a group of pre-Reformation Christians hiding in the freezing remote valleys of the Alps.
Oh, right.
They were maintaining their faith, memorizing scripture, and holding on to the gospel while facing severe, brutal persecution from the established authorities.
So they functioned as sentinels.
They did. They were praising God and holding on to the core truths of the faith during the darkest hours of history, faithfully waiting for the morning light of the Reformation to break.
That is a staggering concept. The idea that even when things look incredibly bleak, when it feels like the culture has gone completely dark and the truth is lost, there is always someone awake on the wall.
There's always a torch burning somewhere in the courtyard.
And our job, just like those travelers leaving Jerusalem, is to encourage those watchers. When we see someone holding the line in a dark time, we are supposed to shout up to them, "Keep going. Do not fall asleep. We see you."
And that encouragement leads us directly into the physical actions the travelers demanded of the priests. We have established the cold, dark setting. We have established the precarious mental state of the guards fighting off idle reverie.
Right.
Now we move into verse 2, where the travelers give a very specific physical instruction.
Let me read verse 2. Lift up your hands in the sanctuary and bless the Lord.
Okay.
I just have to pause here and point out the social dynamic again because it is wild. You have common travelers, people who work with their hands, guys who smell like sheep and dirt, instructing the elite, highly educated, ceremonially pure temple guards on exactly how to conduct their worship.
It takes a lot of nerve, doesn't it?
It takes so much nerve.
It takes nerve, but it demonstrates a beautiful shared ownership of the faith. The ordinary travelers recognize that the priests up on the wall are not just doing a private job, they're acting on behalf of the whole nation.
I see.
So they feel completely justified in telling them, lift up your hands. And according to the commentator Samuel Iles Pierce, this lifting of the hands is not just an empty, theatrical, physical motion.
What is it then?
It carries a specific, twofold theological meaning in the ancient Near East.
What are the two sides of that meaning?
First, it is an intimation of expecting to receive blessings. Think of the posture, an empty hand held out, palms up, waiting to be filled by someone greater.
Yeah, open hands.
It is a physical demonstration of absolute dependence. You are showing that you bring nothing to the table.
And the second meaning?
Second, it is an acknowledgement of blessings already received. It is a universal gesture of surrender and gratitude. You lift your hands to show you have dropped your weapons, you have stopped fighting, and you are yielding to God.
I love how the physical posture of the body is so tightly bound to the internal reality of the soul. But there is a linguistic detail in this verse that adds so much depth to this command. Let's look at this specific word, sanctuary.
Yes, the scholar Henry Hammond observes something fascinating about the original Hebrew text here. The Hebrew word used for sanctuary is kodesh.
Kodesh.
And kodesh can also be translated as holiness.
So depending on how you read it, the verse could be translated as lift up your hands in holiness rather than just referring to a geographical location.
Precisely. And Hammond ties this translation into the strict physical requirements placed on the priests.
What requirement?
Before officiating any duty, before they could ever lift their hands in worship, the priests were legally obligated to physically wash their hands and feet in a massive bronze basin called the brass laver.
Let's explain what that laver was, because it wasn't a small sink in a bathroom. This was a massive, heavy bronze reservoir of water sitting out in the open courtyard.
Very heavy.
And remember the setting we described. It is the middle of the night. It is freezing cold in the mountains of Judea. Plunging your hands and feet into that freezing water was a physical shock to the system.
It was a severe physical requirement.
Right.
And it intricately links physical cleanliness with spiritual readiness.
How so?
The theological point Hammond is making is that you cannot lift up filthy, unwashed hands in the holy place. The external washing of the skin was a constant physical lesson, pointing to the internal need for a clean conscience and a holy life.
Okay, I'm going to challenge this idea for a second because we need to get to the bottom of how posture works. Let's talk about the relationship between physical movement and internal focus.
Sure.
If God is a spirit, and if the heart is what truly matters, if God is looking at the internal state of the priest's soul, why do the travelers command a physical action like lifting hands?
That is a fair question.
Does the physical action of lifting your arms actually matter if the heart is already in the right place?
That is a phenomenal question, and it raises a crucial point about human anthropology. We are not just floating, disconnected minds trapped in meat suits. We are embodied creatures.
Right.
Our theology recognizes that God created both the body and the soul, and they are intimately connected. Often, our physical posture dictates our mental state.
It calls to mind that psychological phenomenon called proprioception.
Oh, yeah.
Where your brain constantly monitors what your body is doing to understand how to feel. It is like the trick where psychologists tell people to force themselves to smile even when they are miserable.
Right, because it works.
The sheer physical act of engaging those facial muscles sends a signal to your brain. Your brain registers the muscle movement and actually starts releasing dopamine and serotonin. The physical action jumpstarts the chemical reality.
That is a brilliant modern analogy for what is happening on this ancient wall. The physical action can lead the spiritual reality.
So they use the body to wake up the mind.
Yes. When the freezing, exhausted priest forcibly lifts his heavy hands up into the cold night air, He is physically breaking his body out of that idle reverie Martin warned about.
Oh, wow.
The bodily movement demands mental attention. He is using his physical frame to shake off the mental sluggishness.
So when the travelers shout, "Lift up your hands," they are offering a practical strategy. They're saying, force your entire being, body and soul, into alignment with your purpose. Use your body to wake up your soul.
It is a posture of total, undivided attention.
And the beautiful thing is it works. The priests, having received this enthusiastic, slightly audacious charge from the common travelers down in the dirt, do not react with pride.
Not at all.
They do not get defensive. They do not ignore the shout from the valley and go back to zoning out.
No, they do not. They engage.
Yeah.
And this is where the entire narrative shifts across the valley. The camera angle moves from the travelers to the wall.
The priests respond.
Which brings us to verse 3, the
Yeah.
mutual benediction.
Let me read it. "The Lord that made heaven and earth bless thee out of Zion."
To fully appreciate this response, you have to picture the acoustics of the moment. The commentator Robert Nisbet paints such a vivid picture here.
Yes, Nisbet's imagery is incredible. Picture the words of the priests, shouted from the very top of the towering temple walls.
Yeah, sound travels exceptionally well in the cold, still night air.
It really does. The shout floats out over the sleeping, tightly packed stone houses of the city. It travels down the steep incline into the quiet, dark basin of the Kidron Valley.
It acts like a giant geological megaphone.
And those words hit the ears of the freezing travelers as a benedictory farewell. It is a massive, authoritative blessing echoing in the dark.
It is a staggering moment of connection between two totally different classes of people, and the theological weight packed into this single sentence is immense.
How so?
The commentator Enma Michael breaks down the dual character of God presented in this one brief response.
Let's walk through that dual character. What is the first aspect of God they mention?
First, God is described primarily as the creator. The priests shout, "The Lord that made heaven and earth." This highlights God in his aspect of infinite strength, unsearchable force, and total sovereignty over the material universe. It is the God of nature.
Right.
Michael points out that leading with this title proves logically that God can bless you. Because he spoke the galaxies into existence, he has infinite resources at his disposal. There is absolutely no limit to his supply chain.
This is such a critical distinction for ancient people. They're not praying to a local tribal deity who only controls the weather over one specific mountain.
Definitely not.
The priests are declaring that the God they worship made the distant stars the travelers are navigating by, and he made the dirt road they're about to walk on.
Yes. His jurisdiction covers the entire cosmos. But then the priests introduce the second aspect of God's character.
What is that?
He is described as blessing them out of Zion. Zion represents his chosen dwelling place among his covenant people. This is the God of grace, the God of redemption.
Okay, so there's a contrast.
Yeah. While the first title, Maker of Heaven and Earth, proves he can bless because he is powerful, the second title, Out of Zion, proves he will bless his people because he is relational. He has bound himself to them in a covenant.
Okay, I have another logistical question here, and this actually comes directly from Abraham Wright's commentary. If God made the entire universe, if his force spans the cosmos from end to end, why localize the blessing out of Zion?
That is a great question.
Why not just shout, "The Lord bless you out of heaven"? Why restrict the infinite creator to a specific dusty hill in Jerusalem?
That is a fantastic tension to highlight, and it gets to the core of how God interacts with humanity. Wright addresses this by explaining the concept of the flow of blessing.
The flow of blessing.
Yeah. While all spiritual and physical blessings originate primarily from heaven, from the throne of God, they flow immediately from Zion.
Immediately. Meaning they travel through a medium, they are routed through a specific channel.
Yes. Zion represents the gathered body of believers, the instituted ordinances, the reading of the word, the specific place of covenant worship.
Ah, I see.
The theological point here is that God uses ordinary means. He channels his vast, cosmic, uncontainable blessings through the specific, local communion of the saints. The untold benefits of heaven are distributed through the local gathering on earth.
So it pushes back against the modern, highly individualized idea where someone says, I have the God of heaven and earth out in the woods. I do not need Zion. I do not need the church.
Exactly. Or, well, spot on. The scriptural model says the blessing of the Creator is specifically and deliberately routed through Zion. It is a package deal.
That is an excellent way to frame it.
And to add to that, there is a crucial, easily missed grammatical detail in this verse that we absolutely must point out.
What is that?
Both J.J. Stewart Perowne and Franz Delitzsch, who are absolute masters of the Hebrew language, note a shift in the pronouns that completely alters how we understand the emotional impact of this blessing.
What is the grammatical shift?
Look at the pronoun at the end of the sentence. The priests shout, "The Lord that made heaven and earth bless thee." In the original language, that pronoun is singular. It is not bless you as in a plural generalized crowd.
But wait, we set the scene earlier. There is a huge multitude of travelers down in the valley. There are hundreds, maybe thousands of people packing up their tents and loading their animals.
Which makes the use of the singular pronoun so striking and intimate. Even though the priests are addressing a massive multitude, the blessing is applied deeply, personally.
Wow.
Delitzsch suggests it treats the whole group as one unified body, but Perowne adds that it places the massive weight of the blessing intimately on each individual listener.
It operates just like the famous ancient high priestly blessing from Numbers chapter 6. The Lord bless thee and keep thee. The Lord make his face shine upon thee. It is always singular.
Yes, the priests on the wall are not just throwing a generic blanket blessing over a faceless, nameless crowd.
Right.
They're looking down at a sea of tired, shivering people and saying, "May the infinite maker of the universe bless you, individually, personally, specifically, as you walk your specific, dangerous road home today."
That brings such an intense, sudden warmth to the freezing cold morning we described earlier.
It really does.
You are standing in the dark, shivering in the mud, stressed out about the long trek ahead, worrying about highway robbers or running out of food. And suddenly, a booming voice from the high wall cuts through the cold air and tells you that the creator of the cosmos sees you and is specifically aiming his covenant blessing directly at you.
It is a massive reassurance, and it is the perfect, grace-filled response to the traveler's initial shout.
Let's summarize the entirety of this beautiful exchange we have been looking at. We started with ordinary, tired people standing in the dirt, looking up at the elite theological guards on the wall.
Right.
The ordinary people take the initiative to encourage their leaders. They yell up at them to stay awake, to fight off mechanical routine, to lift their hands and actively engage their minds in their faith.
And the leaders on the wall do not respond with pride or annoyance. They do not tell the farmers to mind their own business.
No.
They receive the instruction with humility. They lift their hands, and they respond by passing down a massive, universe-spanning blessing. They take the infinite resources of the Creator and hand them directly to the freezing individuals in the valley.
It is a perfect picture of mutual benediction. The watchers on the wall and the travelers in the valley, feeding each other, keeping each other awake in the dark, and relying on the same covenant God.
Which leaves us with a final thought to mull over as we close.
What is that?
We have spent this whole time talking about the physical dark, the night watch, and the towering stone walls of the temple. But here is the historical reality. That temple is gone.
Oh, right.
In 70 A.D., the Roman army under Titus came in and completely leveled it. The walls fell. The stones were thrown down into the valley. The physical sanctuary, where those priests stood guard, literally ceased to exist.
The physical structure vanished.
So the question for you to consider is this. What happens when the wall you were supposed to be guarding collapses? What happens when the familiar structures of your life, your health, your career, your steady routine, the things that made you feel secure, are dismantled?
That is a heavy question.
When the architecture of your life falls apart, do you abandon the watch? Or do you realize that the God who made heaven and earth doesn't need a stone building to maintain his covenant?
Whoa.
Even when the stones fall, the call to stand in the dark, lift your hands, and bless the Lord remains. How do you maintain the night watch when the structure is gone?
Such a challenging framework to examine our own routines and our own responses to the dark seasons of life. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive on Reformed thinking. Keep your hands lifted, stay awake on the wall, and we will talk to you next time.